It all started when Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, decided my front door wasn't fancy enough for her standards. Yes, you heard that right. My front door. She stood there, clipboard in hand, judging the paint, the style, even the handle, as if it personally insulted her. I couldn't believe it. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a door. This was about control, power, and the endless games Karen loved to play under the name of the HOA. Now, let me tell you something. When Karen first knocked on my door with her smug little smirk, I thought it was just another one of her friendly suggestions. But nope. She leaned in close and whispered, "Your door makes the neighborhood look cheap." I froze. My door wasn't broken, it wasn't ugly, and it definitely wasn't bringing down property values. But in Karen's eyes, anything less than her personal taste was a crime. And that's when I felt it. That little spark inside me. The spark that said, enough is enough. Karen wasn't just mocking my door. She was mocking me. From that day, things escalated. Karen started sending letters. Oh yes, the official HOA letters with bold red stamps. Each letter was more ridiculous than the last. One day it was, paint your door a lighter shade. The next it was, replace the hardware. Then, this doesn't meet community standards. Standards? More like Karen's personal mood swings. And here's the part that still makes me laugh. She didn't just want me to change my door. She wanted me to buy the exact same door she had. Imagine that. The neighborhood dictator wanted us all to be little copies of her. Same doors, same paint, same lifeless personality. But you know what? I'm not built like that. I wasn't about to bow down to a clipboard queen. Instead of fighting her directly, I decided to play a smarter game. And let me tell you, it was a game she never saw coming. Before I reveal what I did, let me paint the picture for you. Imagine living in a neighborhood where one woman controls everything. What color you paint your house, where you park your car, how tall your grass grows, even the kind of flowers you plant. Doesn't sound like freedom, right? Sounds more like a prison with picket fences. And Karen, she thrived on it. She loved the power. She strutted down the street like she was the mayor, except worse, because at least mayors get elected. Karen just shoved her way into the HOA board and refused to leave. The sad part? Most neighbors just gave in. They didn't want to deal with her constant harassment. So they painted their doors, cut their grass, and kept quiet. But me? No. I wasn't going to let Karen bully me into submission. So, I started planning. The more Karen pushed, the more determined I became. One evening, I sat on my porch, staring at that door she hated so much. It was a simple door. A strong, solid door that had been with me since the day I bought the house. It held memories. The day I carried in my first box. The day my kids ran through it, laughing. The day I stood there after a long shift, finally home. That door wasn't just wood and paint. It was a piece of my story. And Karen wanted to erase it. That's when the idea hit me. If Karen loved mocking doors so much, then maybe it was time to give her something new to obsess about. Something bigger. Something that would flip the script entirely. So, what did I do? I went after her precious gates. You see, Karen wasn't just obsessed with her own house. She was obsessed with the neighborhood's HOA property, the fancy iron gates at the entrance. Those gates were her pride and joy. Every time she walked past them, she puffed up like a peacock. She bragged about how secure they made us, how exclusive they looked. Honestly, they were just two rusty gates that needed oil. But to Karen, they were a crown. So, I thought, what if I bought them? Yes, you heard me. What if I actually owned the gates that Karen worshipped? It sounded crazy at first. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Because those gates weren't actually HOA owned. They were technically part of the land deed owned by the original builder. And guess what? That builder was selling off leftover parcels of land quietly. If I moved fast, I could grab it before anyone else noticed. And that's exactly what I did. I remember the day I signed the papers. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but oh, the thrill! With one signature, I became the owner of the very gates Karen treated like her kingdom. I wanted to laugh out loud right there in the lawyer's office. And the best part? Karen had no idea. So the next week, when she came strutting over to my house with yet another letter about my ugly door, I smiled politely. I nodded. I let her rant. But inside, I was already holding the biggest trump card of my life. Because while Karen thought she controlled me, I controlled the gates. The very gates she couldn't stop bragging about. Now, here's where the real fun began. One morning, I called a locksmith. Not just any locksmith, the best in town. I handed him the deed and said, "Change the locks on the gates." He looked at me, raised an eyebrow, but when he saw the papers, he got to work. Within an hour, the gates had brand new locks, and guess who had the only keys? Me. Later that day, Karen drove up, ready for her daily parade through the neighborhood. Except this time, the gates wouldn't open. She got out of her car, furious, jiggling the lock, punching in her code, shouting into the intercom. Nothing. That's when I stepped out, holding the keys. "Looking for these?" I asked. The look on her face. Priceless. And let me tell you, watching her fumble for words was the sweetest victory. She stammered, You can't do that. These gates belong to the HOA. I calmly pulled out the deed. Not anymore. They belong to me. Her jaw dropped. She turned red. She waved her clipboard like a weapon, but it was useless. The paper in my hands was stronger than all her HOA rules combined. From that day on, everything changed. Karen couldn't boss people around with her precious gates anymore. She couldn't brag about them at HOA meetings. She couldn't even drive through them without my permission. And as for my door, it stayed exactly the same. Solid. Strong. Mine. But let me pause here. Because this story isn't just about doors or gates. It's about standing up to bullies. It's about fighting for your right to live in peace. It's about showing that sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling or arguing, it's outsmarting. Karen thought she had all the power. She thought mocking my door would make me bow down. But instead, it made me rise up. So here's the lesson I learned. When someone tries to control you, don't just react. Think. Plan. And when the time is right, flip the game in your favor. And you know what? This is only the beginning. Because buying those gates was just step one. What I did next shocked the entire neighborhood, and it made Karen realize she had finally met her match. But I'll tell you that part in the next section. For now, let me leave you with this. Never let anyone, not even an HOA Karen with a clipboard, decide how you live your life. Stand tall. Be bold. And if you can, own the gates. So there I was, standing at the gates with the keys in my hand, while Karen's face turned 10 different shades of red. She sputtered, she shouted, she even threatened to call the board. But the truth was out. The gates she once bragged about, the gates she treated like her personal trophy, now belonged to me. For a moment, the whole street felt silent. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. Some even stepped out on their porches, holding coffee mugs, watching the drama unfold. They couldn't believe it. The queen of the HOA, the woman who ruled with letters and fines, was finally powerless. And me? I wasn't just relieved. I felt something deeper. Something powerful. For the first time, Karen wasn't in control. I was. The funny part, I didn't even care that much about the gates. To me, they were just metal and hinges. But to Karen, they were her pride. And now, every time she looked at them, she had to remember who really held the power. That night, I sat on my porch again, this time sipping a cold drink, watching the sunset. My door was still standing strong, just as it always had. But now, I had the keys to Karen's kingdom. And it felt good. But little did I know, Karen wasn't finished. A week later, she came storming back. She had a folder in her hand, full of papers. She marched right up to me, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. "You can't do this," she shouted. "These gates are HOA property, and I'll prove it." I stayed calm. I let her rant. And when she was done, I pulled out my deed again. I handed her a copy, nice and neat. "Read it, Karen," I said. Her hands trembled as she scanned the words. You could see it in her eyes, the moment the truth sank in. She didn't own the gates. The HOA didn't own the gates. I did. She looked up at me, furious. You won't get away with this. I smiled. Oh, I already have. That's when something strange started to happen. Neighbors began approaching me. At first, they were cautious. They whispered, "Is it true? Do you really own the gates?" And when I nodded, they grinned. They laughed. Some even patted me on the back. Turns out, I wasn't the only one sick of Karen's nonsense. Everyone was tired of her rules, her letters, her fines. They just didn't know how to stop her. But when I bought those gates, I gave them hope. Suddenly, I wasn't just the guy with the ugly door. I was the guy who stood up to Karen, and won. Word spread fast. People started gathering in my yard, sipping coffee, chatting, even laughing about Karen's latest tantrum. For the first time, the neighborhood felt alive. United. Free. But of course, Karen hated it. She couldn't stand the fact that people were siding with me. She couldn't stand the fact that her little empire was crumbling. So she came up with a new plan. She decided to fine me. Yes, you heard that right. She fined me for unauthorized gate alterations. Imagine that. The woman who no longer had any authority over the gates was still trying to punish me for owning them. I almost choked laughing when I read the letter. But instead of ignoring it, I framed it. Yes, I put it in a big golden frame and hung it right next to my front door. The same door she mocked. So every time Karen came over, she had to see her own powerless letter staring back at her. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no. I wanted to send a message. Not just to Karen, but to the entire HOA. So, I decided to make a few upgrades to my gates. I hired a local artist, a guy who specialized in metalwork. Together, we designed custom gate panels. And on those panels, we welded giant, bold letters that spelled, "My property. My rules." The day we unveiled it, the neighborhood gathered like it was the 4th of July. Kids cheered, parents clapped, and everyone took pictures. Karen. She nearly fainted. Her precious gates, once the pride of the HOA, now stood as a monument to her defeat. But here's the best part. I didn't stop at just the gates. I took it further. You see, when I bought the gates, I also bought a strip of land attached to them. That strip gave me legal authority to control access in and out of the neighborhood. So, I set up a brand new rule. No entry without respect. It wasn't written on paper. It wasn't enforced with fines. It was enforced with attitude. Anyone who came through those gates had to understand this was a neighborhood of equals. No dictators. No bullies. No Karens. And slowly, the vibe of the entire place began to shift. People started planting flowers without fear of getting fined. They painted their doors in bright colors, red, blue, yellow. Kids rode bikes freely, without Karen yelling about noise violations. The street came alive again. All because one door stood its ground. Now, don't get me wrong. Karen didn't disappear overnight. She tried everything, calling lawyers, holding emergency HOA meetings, even trying to bribe city officials. But every time, the deed shut her down. Every time, the law was on my side. And the more she fought, the more she embarrassed herself. Neighbors stopped following her rules. They stopped paying attention to her threats. Some even started ignoring her completely. She went from queen to clown. And honestly, watching that transformation was sweeter than any victory I could have imagined. But here's where the real twist comes in. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from Karen. Not from the HOA. From the original developer of the neighborhood. They said they had more parcels of land for sale. Sidewalks. Common areas. Even the community clubhouse. And that's when the craziest idea hit me. If I could own the gates, why stop there? Why not buy everything Karen thought she controlled? So I did. Piece by piece, I bought it all. The sidewalks. The clubhouse. Even the pool she loved to inspect for rule violations. By the end of it, the HOA wasn't just powerless, it was meaningless. Karen had nothing left to control. The day I announced it, the entire neighborhood threw a block party. Music blasted, kids ran through sprinklers, and people danced in the streets. I stood there, looking at the gates, the clubhouse, the pool, all mine, and thought, this is what freedom feels like. And Karen, she sat alone on her porch, glaring, powerless, watching the neighborhood she once ruled with fear now thriving with joy. That was the ultimate revenge. Not making her miserable, but making everyone else happy. So what's the moral of this story? It's simple. Don't let anyone, not even a Karen with a clipboard, steal your peace. Don't let bullies shrink your spirit. And most importantly, don't fight them on their terms. Outsmart them. Outsmart them so completely that when the dust settles, they don't even know what hit them. My door may have been mocked, but in the end, it stood strong. And because of that, I ended up owning the very gates that once symbolized control. Life has a funny way of flipping the script when you refuse to bow down. So, let me leave you with this call to action. If you've ever dealt with a Karen, if you've ever felt bullied, mocked, or controlled, remember this story. Remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's ownership. Stand tall. Fight smart. And when life gives you a Karen, go by her gates. Because at the end of the day, freedom isn't about doors or gates. It's about courage. And trust me, courage is contagious.